Hello, protocols, packets, and programs. These majestic crustaceans have just spawned on the shores of ASW. Driven by evolution, they know instinctively how to reference each variable they will ever encounter within their lifetime. However, evolution also leaves vestigial organs like FFI. As the other newborn processes rush to safety, this one returns to see and exposes a dangling pointer. Drawn by this unpredictable behavior, a swarm of exploits appears. Which means this week we talk with Chen Gour Arie from Enzo Security about how Agile broke AppSec and what we should do to fix it. In the news segment, a Next-Auth.js parsing problem, Slack leaks password hashes, malicious projects appear in PyPy and GitHub, and more. Borrow safely and stay tuned for Application Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. It's the show to learn the latest tools, techniques, and processes necessary to understand DevOps, application security, and cloud security. Your trusted source for the latest application security news. It's time for Application Security Weekly.
Your organization is building and updating business-critical web applications faster than ever. And with so much pressure to move fast, you may find yourself making trade-offs between innovation and security. Now you can build fast without sacrificing security with Invicti, the application security platform that helps your dev, sec, and ops teams work together to secure every website, web app, and API. With unparalleled accuracy, coverage, and automation, Invicti scales like no other AppSec solution. Discover why many of the world's largest organizations innovate securely with Invicti. Visit securityweekly.com/Invicti. ThreatLocker is a global cybersecurity leader paving the way for businesses everywhere to implement a zero-trust security solution that not only protects business-critical data, but also helps mitigate cyber attacks. ThreatLocker's unique endpoint solutions help you to work smart and strengthen your security infrastructure from the ground up. ThreatLocker's allow listing, ring fencing, storage control, elevation control, and network access control solutions give you a more secure approach to blocking the exploits of unknown application vulnerabilities. If you're looking to enhance your cybersecurity and stop zero-day vulnerabilities exploiting your data, reach out to a ThreatLocker cyber hero today. Visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker to learn more. This is episode 207, recorded August 8th, 2022. I'm your host, Mike Shima. And I'm here with John Kinsella. Hello, John.
Good morning. Sorry I'm running a little bit late. I had to update all my Slack passwords and then redo my Microsoft authentications, and then I had to re-log back into GitHub, and then I also had to go back and log back into my Google Mails. Then from that, I had to go over and reset all my SSH keys, and I think I'm caught up on the morning.
I hope you didn't lose your FIDO key, because that's going to be even, that account recovery is going to make your morning even more difficult. But that was a great preview of basically another month of news, I think, John. I guess while you're doing that, don't forget to check out our library of on-demand webcasts and technical trainings at securityweekly.com/on-demand. Chen Gour Arie is the chief architect and co-founder of Enzo Security. With over 15 years of hands-on experience in cybersecurity and software development, Chen demonstrably bolstered the software security of dozens of global enterprise organizations across multiple industry verticals. An enthusiastic builder, he has focused his career on building tools to optimize and accelerate security testing and all related workflows. Hello, Chen. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. What a flashy title. I didn't I didn't realize that this is how it's going to be introduced.
Well, we want to talk about we want to make sure we introduce you properly, especially for those of you who are watching our video. You're a hands-on hardware builder, as everyone can see with the pegboard behind you. But we'll come back to that in a moment, because first, AppSec is broken, or agility broke AppSec. So before we start to talk about the good parts about fixing it, I suppose we need to understand what's exactly gone wrong here.
So I think that what happened, and a lot of practitioners in AppSec are experiencing it, is what happened over the last decade and more, is that more and more was invested into making software. And the main focus of high-tech industry was to create software faster and more resilient, more featureful, to offer more with software. And to do this, software industry had to reinvent itself every very short interval of time, bring new technologies, and above all, also bring methods and processes and new management concepts to support the manufacturing of this new industry. It's a new thing, and it's still a manufacturing pipeline, and they adapted very, very fast in software engineering to doing things more accurately, more fastly, and gaining a lot of resilience and building a lot of tools to support it.
So yeah, the underlying theme there clearly is speed.
Yes,
developers
exactly.
are going faster, but you also touched on, I think, a couple aspects too, that the speed of development, there's also speed of environments or the speed of tech stacks changing perhaps. By the time we finish this segment, there may be 4 or 5 new JavaScript frameworks out there, but there's
exactly.
also, some other languages, there's cloud adoption. How did these, are these aspects, are these tech surgences, trying to come up with some words here, are they also breaking AppSec, or what's the pro, what's the drag there? Yeah.
So I think you said it's broken, and I think it is I don't want to say struggling, but it is fighting to match with the speed that all this has created in the uncontrolled evolution of software today. Uncontrolled evolution of digital services in general. It's not uncontrolled because we build it, but it's very, very fast, and it's going up very, very quickly. And we also see the magnitude and the impact of breaches, which goes side by side with this. One of the things that I think that happened in this process is that when engineering teams have gained powers in delivering faster and in higher quality, AppSec teams were running on the sidelines to protect this process, and we're trying to align to their way of doing things, or the way of engineering of doing things with SSDLC and these kind of processes. But it's not completely aligned with what requires from something that is essentially a security operation. The security operation has in some places can have different, so some processes can be more optimal for it, and some workflows can be more optimal for it. And we know this from a lot of other activities in the rest of cybersecurity, where things are not always being approached from security folks the way they're being approached from engineering. They have kind of different perspectives and different challenges.
Usually when we talk about speed, the first thing we talk about is fixing vulnerabilities. Fix vulns faster, or how fast can you fix vulns? But you haven't even touched on the vulnerability side of things so far. You touched on the just building software, and as you're describing, aligning the workflows to keep up with that. Tell us a bit more about what a good alignment might look like, or how an AppSec team can keep up, or perhaps should keep up with this type on the development side, not even talking about the vulnerabilities.
Yeah, so in a general sense, because of the reality of many development processes progressing in parallel in an organization and not leaving enough room for AppSec to oversee the full process, AppSec have to choose. So people in AppSec have to choose where to focus. And we know that if you put your most talented pen tester on an artifact, they will find magical bugs that can be exploited to do wonderful things. But if you just fire some test automation on it, you will get different results and less qualified results, and you will also generate a backlog of triage tasks. You will reap something out of it, you will benefit from it a little bit, but still you have to first prioritize. And I think this is one key component I say major thing to consider is this real need to prioritize because of the cost of high quality AppSec service around a specific program. It is very expensive, and you first have to prioritize. And then begins the question of how can you get to a point that you can actually properly prioritize. But it already shows, if I'm taking it back to engineering also are very busy on prioritizing, but they have a full workflow led by product people to prioritize engineering activities and tasks and build a backlog, and they invest a lot in it. And this is something that with AppSec, if you want to be effective and you know that you need to prioritize, you need the same level of investment. I need the adequate level of investment or equivalent level of investment.
Yeah, and it sounds like then that prioritization, I think, speaks to the idea that we can't just say AppSec, we're going to become agile for some rough definition of agile, or every 2 weeks we're going to have a plan, and the next 2 weeks we're going to have a new plan, and we're going to see how we're doing things, and we're going to move our Kanban board, little cards from left to right. So those are just sort of the rituals of agile, if you will. But you were talking about prioritization, having people direct this, or having, how to figure out how to do the work. Tell us a bit more about that. What are some of the ways that we should be prioritizing, or what should we think about as inputs to make those decisions about priority?
So I think we kind of jumped in to discuss a specific element that shows the need of rethinking the way we do things in some way. And then if I take a step back, we can, and I think that what you said about the Kanban board and the day-to-day of agile, and when it's broken down to things, is going to be there. It's going to be similar still in a way that it is actually being conducted. But the first thing to do is to arrange some frame of thinking around the process of AppSec. And in many security, in actuality, most security frameworks and other tools that are designed to let you do something in a very systematic way, they begin from inventorying, from understanding your problem scope. And I think that in cybersecurity, it's well established that this is necessary. And in application security, it is established that it is necessary, but it is very challenging. And this has become one point where many teams are lacking. Understanding what kind of software they're protecting, because of the fact that it changes very quickly. It can be one thing today and another thing tomorrow. And this would be the foundstone of anything that is about building a systematic cybersecurity plan around it. So one thing that is very important in thinking of agility is to manage this inventory, because from there you decide what kind of activity should be prioritized. After you see the map, you have a map of your bases, and this is coming very much from security-oriented thinking. You have a map of your bases, and then next thing you need to map is what is your status across the bases, what is your security baseline. And once you understand this, it's much easier to take decisions on operations or campaigns maybe that you can lead in order to make improvements in different ways. So if we take concepts from SWOT kind of thinking to this framework, we can say that we can prioritize places where we have huge opportunity of increasing the baseline in a wide manner across the entire inventory, or places where we have many threats and high risk, because these are crucial parts of the inventory that are very, very sensitive. And this is to take ideas from SWOT and bring it into our thinking in AppSec because of our challenges in mapping, in prioritizing. This is one aspect of it, at least.
No, and that aspect of inventory is pretty common. I think that's been a recurring theme, of course, for AppSec for decades. I think it's safe to say. And I want to guess that cloud service providers, they want to bill you down to the penny per CPU and per memory, so they know everything you have. But how well does that inventory of cloud service providers billing you translate into what either the engineering team knows or the AppSec team knows?
Yeah, so think of I'll give you 10 lines of code to put in an artifact, and then do whatever you want with these 10 lines of codes. So it is something that is hidden from the perspective that those vendors have. The actual logic that is implemented inside the code is the actual challenge of AppSec people. In the inventory of application security should be also abstracts, like an application. Application is an abstract. It's something that is composed from many different digital components together, services, and then behind it there are libraries, and there are many different layers of software in it. And the challenge of AppSec is to protect it from all the different angles, from the infected packages, but also from business logic problems that can be in the algorithmical solution of the question solved by the specific API. And this is why the kind of inventory that you need also to include also this perspective, because your risk association is building on it. If you want to prioritize tasks in most important assets, you need to understand what are these most important assets. And it will be very hard to look at the EC2 instances and say, okay, this is super important application from the EC2 profile, or even from its networking profile. Maybe you can learn from it. You can enrich your application inventory from this data, but it will not give you the full context that you need for this prioritization task.
Yeah, no, excellent point. That context is what it matters here. And I think one of the context, or one of the ways that we think about context is frameworks. And you mentioned one or two, or just kind of, and as you're talking about this, I'm curious, as you've seen organizations either adopt frameworks or consider frameworks, what seem to be the ones that stand out as, successful adoptions or lend themselves to adoption? And here I'm thinking of not the OWASP top 10, but perhaps the ASVS or the OWASP SAM getting into a maturity model. Are there certain frameworks that you would recommend, or characteristics that you would recommend to look for organizations wondering about this?
So the first thing is that I'd recommend to confront what you're doing with a standard that is adapted enough, because you're probably doing something that is decision making that is not necessarily well thought in a way of preparing with a framework. And then you can even start from generic cybersecurity frameworks, maybe take NIST and ask yourself, how am I performing NIST wise in application security with the 5 functions? So this is the one thing that I would recommend the most, and it doesn't really matter which one you take, as long as it's of course an adapted one and a community backed one. I think that if we ask ourselves which standards or framework have been most adapted, I think that the answer is easy. Those that we can get in trouble if we're not adapting. So we're talking about regulation, privacy and regulation, and payment card protection. And these are people can have different opinions about them, but they have managed to accomplish improvement. And we can see how things like OWASP Top 10, which is some sort of a focus proposal maybe, is adapted very, very much in many of those standards as a reference, at least to something that is minimal application security. I think that it's very important to, when you look at standards, is to consider your metrics, what kind of thing you are going to measure. And in this maturity initiatives and standards like maybe BSIM and OWASP SAM are doing a good work in building up these metrics and proposing elaborate enough metrics and with the right breakdown. Or with a useful breakdown. One thing that is very challenging with these standards, so BSIM is more of a research, but SAM is a standard and a framework. And one thing that is challenging with them is that the data collection, the data that is required in order to populate those metrics is not readily available for most organizations, and then it puts a bar on entry level for measuring yourself the maturity framework way. I think that measuring based on aspiration, on what you would wish to be in AppSec, so setting up your standard and measuring yourself against that is a good point, is a good idea. It will highlight, it will put the light on places where you can find ways to get to that maturity, but if your matrix itself requires too much effort to populate, you will probably abandon it at some point because you're very busy. So yeah,
Yeah, very fair point. I think, and there's also, I want to get into that aspect of aspiration and sort of how to get there, because I'm going to be a little bit general here, but I sort of think that the BSIM is not so prescriptive. It's more descriptive of, are you doing X, Y, or Z, or how are you doing X, Y, or Z? SAM, the OWASP version, has a bit more prescriptive. You should be doing X, Y, or Z, these particular practices. And then even SALSA itself, a recent framework, that is very specific just on the supply chain practices to do. So we have maybe called a spectrum of generic practices down to very specific practices to adopt. And you're mentioning there, what goals do we aspire to? Want to kind of break that down a little bit, because you described we need some asset inventory. We've prioritized them. We choose a framework. What are some other common steps then in terms of AppSec catching up to agile development, for example? And one of the things that comes to mind is automation, but just saying automation is pretty generic. Help us break that down a bit.
Yeah, so here at Enzo, we are working on a delivery framework or delivery approach that we call ASPM, Application Security Posture Management. And in this is basically, we tried to simplify the key components for an AppSec program and leave a lot of room for something that happens in stages of progress. So you don't start with a 100% maturity in AppSec, because you don't even have, if you're a business that was just born yesterday, you don't even have an application. So you can't be mature in AppSec, you don't have a software to protect. So all of it is built as you build your company or as you introduce AppSec into a company that is already mature. And with our ASPM approach, what we focus on is running this operation of identifying the inventory and enriching this data with data that is a combination of profiling of all the assets to say which assets are important. So you will get the inventory perspective of the prioritization, and then populating a matrix that basically discuss how appropriately our security controls are covering all the asset inventory and what kind of alerts and remarks those security controls give us back. So you get a matrix of all the assets, all the controls, and feedback from each control, like a huge panel of LEDs that you can see exactly where is the problem. And we use different tools to prioritize this with data aggregation, but the flow is very simple. You collect this data, you populate the metrics, and then when you take a look at the metrics, and this is how we work with our customers, you basically choose some sort of a campaign that is designed to either have a wide effect on the inventory, and for example, to eradicate SCA-related problems. How do we approach, and when you start with a new inventory, and that was never gone through proper source composition analysis process that is about reducing number of vulnerable packages, you have a huge task ahead of you. We're going to have a lot of packages to upgrade. So this process is not something that you can expect to accomplish immediately or quickly. So your campaign would be to build the right steps in accomplishing this and think of how you do this and do it in a few different steps until you solve this part, and then you can move into the next problem. And this is how you climb the maturity steps. And the advantage of this method is that you can always define your campaigns based on the problems that are relevant specifically to you. If you are bringing in a new technology, you will build some operation around this specific technology as you bring it in. It's very natural for AppSec to be responsive this way. But what's missing is to do it in a systematic and organized fashion, with measuring the progress, measuring the impact, and visualizing the effect of those activities, and also being able to predict what activity will have the most impact.
And I suppose the way you're breaking that down then is it's the idea that these campaigns are what reflects that shift to an agile style approach from AppSec. So you were describing there too, having measuring progress, identifying, measuring impacts, importantly, showing the value of what you're doing, why you've made these efforts, because otherwise the alternative is just a waterfall method saying we're going to buy this. You were using SCA, we're going to buy an SCA tool, and then a year from now, we're going to be fine, rather than showing what those steps are and why the SCA tool is going to help us, how it fits into the pipeline. So that I think, kind of repeating that back to you, I think that's the image that's coming to mind is what you're going for here.
Yeah, and I think that the reality of the still waterfall-like thinking of AppSec meets us when a few weeks after we integrated this SCA solution, so we switched to flip on Dependabot, and then we need to deal with the aftermath of so many issues and no process to help the engineers decide on which one to act. We've all felt it, and I think this is exactly where this is huge contradiction between our gate or waterfall kind of ways that we've adapted, through the early days of AppSec, is not adequate anymore for this modern, agile, fast-moving software development world that we live in.
Yeah. Now we've been talking about asset inventory, makes a lot of sense, of course, and we use just SCA just as one example. But you have this AppSec map, appsecmap.com, and we have a link to it in the show notes. That I play a lot of D&D. This looks like a fun D&D hex crawl adventure through the dangers of a vendor landscape. But tell us a little bit of what this looks like and where are the dragons to avoid, or what should we be doing as we adventure through here?
So the AppSec map is an initiative we started about a year ago, and the goal is to simplify the process of simplify for people the looking for information about AppSec. So we put it in a very visually convenient way, in a searchable way, and with simple categories. If you go to appsecmap.com, you will find the map. It has just different categories of AppSec related services and solutions. You can get some little bit of information about each vendor and each solution, and maybe help you navigate between the different things that you can do in AppSec when using services and solutions. And just recently, we released an update to this map that you can actually customize and personalize your own map, and including this view, simplify the high-level perspective of the kind of asset inventory that you have, what kind of software you're building, and then also arrange add to this map the kind of solutions that you're using to protect it, and get some sense of what an automated and systematic posture calculation that is based on these metrics can feel like. When you discover and you're better in discovering your asset inventory, you made progress on this channel, on this track of inventorying your assets. When you added more testing, you made progress on the track of doing that automated testing and manual testing. You installed a firewall, you made progress on implementing protection. So it's to a little bit help with building up the journey and seeing what is available throughout this journey. The future to come, we're hoping to add more and more information. This is built with submissions from vendors and with suggestions from the community. We see this as an open, collaborative project. We build it, but we bring in all the content that is coming from the community, and we're very happy with this project. So if you go to appsecmap.com, and then in there you can also go to My Map, it will let you customize your own map and through this nice user journey inside.
Sure. So it's the idea we've got a framework that's going to give us something we want to aspire to. And then perhaps this map, if you will, not to go too deep into metaphors, is giving us the idea of a plan, perhaps, or how to get there on a particular, this group of controls, this other group of controls. A lot of what you've described, I think, are a lot of improvements to process, at least on the AppSec side, where we're obviously doing engineering improvements for the dev side, developers, making code safer, more secure. But what about, adopting agile? Have you seen it mostly that adoption on the AppSec side through processes, or is AppSec also adopting those engineering tasks as well, and actual agile type of engineering?
Yeah, so we've seen teams that put their hands inside and take ownership on some parts of the engineering itself. If this is what you're referring to, I think it has its advantages if you can lead this kind of process, but it's also somewhat of a say brave practice, because the application security folks, and these are my friends and community, and they're very sharp people, but it's a little bit different than the mindset of a developer sometimes. So unless it's a company that has a good culture fit for contributors that are not strictly developers, because with developers, what happens is a good engineering organization would require proper tests and proper deployments and proper things that are, if you think about it, it could be that an AppSec person that knows how to hack things shouldn't waste their time on pushing artifacts through CI and wasting times in this area. But again, it's about the culture fit of the organization, I think.
So yeah. Once again, that goes on to the theme of context matters. I'm curious there too, because I want to poke at that a little bit, because some of it is the idea that I agree. Someone who's a good application security tester focus their efforts on finding flaws, doing threat modeling, uncovering critical issues that should be fixed. But we also get to the other side, where developers do still need to be fixing those problems, fixing those bugs, and those security bugs aren't necessarily, I'm going to be, I don't know how provocative this is, but they say, wasting our time fixing security issues as opposed to the features we wanted to be working on. There's also that kind of mentality that could be flipped a bit. So how do you approach that? Because when you're talking about culture and talking about these shifts for AppSec to catch up with agile development.
Yeah, so I think it all comes back to prioritization, but it is definitely, and I think more and more AppSec folks feels this, it's definitely one of the main components of our challenge, is to inspire developers to be on our side. And I think that one thing that can really help is to not expect them to be on your side just because. Or from the very beginning also. So give it a little bit of time. Try to find things that are interesting for them. When you deliver your AppSec feedback, some of it is super boring. Some of it is very annoying. Try to give more room to places where at least in the very beginning, before they become your friends, and before you are aligned on the shared goal of creating high quality software, you can inspire them by, for example, communicating cool bugs that you have. And if we go back to the discussion we have before about frameworks, I think this is captured very well in frameworks. So if you look at SAM, there is a huge part about communicating what you do to the organization. This is a crucial part. If you look at SAM again, you will see that this communication is not going only to developers, because yes, as much as we want to do everything through positive inspiration, sometimes we can't really afford to have problems in some areas. So you need to do the same things also with the management, and set structured agreements between management and R&D and security. To support a standard, basically, to set an internal company standard that says what is our expectation from security things. How do we decide? So in most companies, it will be something that we do not allow criticals and high issues out of SLA in our 20% most critical assets. And they try, and then this will be this. Once you do this, this becomes the agenda of the entire organization. It will be more easy to enforce, or I don't want to use this aggressive word, but to promote it. But if you do it without the bottom-up part, the part that inspires engineer and give them the feeling of why this is, first of all, cool. It's really nice to hack things and to show how you can tweak it and hack it, but also important and can be significant to the future of the company, basically.
Yeah, and I think there's that. It definitely speaks to that idea of, if we say developers don't care about security, well, maybe they don't have to care just because you come from security. Build that relationship, build that conversation with them. And you mentioned there can be fun ways to take things apart, break software. But as we wrap up here, I want to take a slight detour into the hardware. What are some of the fun things that you've taken apart hardware-wise or hardware hacking in your past?
So to be honest, this is just a display. The real wall of shame, maybe to call it, is at my house. And over there, I have proper equipment. And the thing that I do mostly with it is to recycle old furniture into things that I can use. It's just to take some time away from the digital realm and use my hands a little bit just for fun. So
I love that. Yeah, I don't think you're alone in that, in terms of InfoSec people moving into hardware in the sense of furniture, woodworking for that matter. And maybe I'll just say that's a great way to also build those relationships with developers. Just find some common interests, and then have those discussions about the asset, exciting discussions about asset inventory and frameworks.
Yeah.
Oh, well, frameworks aside, and my observations on their excitement, we were excited to have you here to talk with us, Chen. This was a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. It was great. Thank you.
Also like to thank John and thank all of our listeners. We're going to take a quick break and return with news of the week.